Most people believe their biggest problem is indecision. They believe something is wrong with them. They think their personality is flawed. They tell themselves they overthink everything. They say they are bad at making decisions. But what if that belief is completely wrong? What if the problem is not your personality at all? What if the real problem is something deeper happening inside the brain? There is a moment that happens quietly in the mind, a moment where thinking stops being useful, and instead of helping you move forward, it traps you. Psychologists call this moment analysis paralysis. It is the point where the brain has gathered so much information that it can no longer organize it into a decision. Your mind begins to circle. You compare options. You simulate outcomes. You imagine risks. You replay possibilities. And the more you think, the more complicated everything becomes. Instead of clarity, you experience fog. Instead of confidence, you experience hesitation. Instead of movement, you remain frozen. But this is not a character flaw. This is not weakness. This is simply what happens when a powerful brain is pushed beyond the point where thinking remains productive. Your mind was never designed to process endless possibilities. Yet modern life constantly forces you to try. Every day you face hundreds of choices. Career paths, relationships, financial decisions, life directions, opportunities, risks. Each one feels important. Each one feels like it might shape your future. And because the stakes feel high, your brain tries to protect you. It gathers more information. It analyzes deeper. It slows everything down in an attempt to prevent mistakes. But there is a hidden limit inside the human brain. After a certain point, more thinking does not improve the decision. It damages it. At first, analysis creates clarity. But after that threshold is crossed, analysis becomes noise. The mind begins to loop. Instead of solving the problem, it repeats the problem. This is the moment where many intelligent people become stuck. Because intelligence creates more possibilities. A powerful mind can imagine more outcomes. It can predict more risks. It can analyze more angles. But this ability also means the brain can create more uncertainty. Instead of narrowing choices, it expands them. Instead of simplifying decisions, it multiplies them. And the more possibilities the brain creates, the harder it becomes to choose. So the mind delays. It waits. It searches for perfect certainty. But perfect certainty does not exist. Life does not provide perfect answers before action. Instead, clarity often appears only after movement begins. This is the paradox that traps so many people. They believe clarity must come before action. But in reality, action often creates clarity. Think about how the brain evolved. For most of human history, decisions were simple. Danger or safety, food or hunger, move or stay. The brain learned to act quickly. Speed was survival. But modern life changed the environment. Now we face decisions with dozens of variables. We analyze careers. We compare opportunities. We calculate risks. We try to predict outcomes years into the future. And the brain treats these decisions as if survival is at stake. So it slows down. It gathers more data. It searches for guarantees. But the more data it gathers, the more possibilities appear. And each possibility introduces new uncertainty. This is why overthinking feels exhausting. The brain is trying to solve a puzzle with too many pieces. Imagine trying to choose a path in a forest. At first, there are two paths, left or right. The decision is simple. But imagine suddenly seeing 10 paths, then 20, then 50. Each path might lead somewhere better. Each path might contain hidden risks. Suddenly, the mind freezes, because the brain wants to evaluate every path before choosing, but it cannot. There are too many variables, so it hesitates. And while it hesitates, nothing changes. This is the cost of analysis paralysis. It steals time. Every moment spent trying to achieve perfect certainty is a moment where life continues moving forward without you. Opportunities pass. People move forward. Situations evolve. But the overthinking mind remains stuck in the same place, waiting, analyzing, replaying possibilities. And the longer this pattern continues, the more pressure builds. Because now the decision feels even bigger. Now it carries the weight of lost time. This creates even more hesitation, even more analysis, even more fear of making the wrong choice. But here is the truth most people never hear. The most successful individuals are not the ones who always make perfect decisions. They are the ones who make decisions and adjust quickly. They move. Then they learn. Then they move again. They understand something powerful. Most decisions in life are not permanent. They are experiments. But the overthinking mind treats every decision as if it is final, as if one wrong move will destroy everything. So it delays. It searches for safety. It searches for guarantees. But guarantees rarely exist. The people who move forward understand that progress is rarely perfect. It is iterative. You take a step, you observe the result, you correct the direction, then you take another step. Clarity emerges during movement, not before it. Think about how a car moves through fog. If the driver waits until the entire road becomes visible, they will never move. Instead, they drive slowly. They trust the headlights. They move forward one small distance at a time. Each meter reveals the next. Life works the same way. Movement reveals information. Action creates feedback, and feedback creates clarity. But when the mind refuses to move until everything is certain, the fog never lifts, because the fog only clears through motion. This is the mental reset that breaks analysis paralysis. You do not need perfect certainty. You need a simple framework. When faced with a decision, ask 3 questions. First question: what is the worst realistic outcome? Not the catastrophic scenario your imagination created, the realistic downside. Often, the mind exaggerates risk. It imagines disaster. But when examined objectively, the worst outcome is often manageable. Second question: can you recover if things go wrong? Most situations allow recovery. Careers change. Paths adjust. Opportunities appear again. Few decisions are irreversible. But the overthinking mind treats every choice as permanent. Recognizing recoverability removes enormous pressure. Third question: what action moves the situation forward? Not perfect action, just forward action. Because forward motion produces information, and information simplifies decisions. This simple framework transforms how the brain approaches uncertainty. Instead of searching for perfect answers, it searches for movement. And movement reduces anxiety, because action returns control to the mind. When you act, you stop imagining endless possibilities. You begin interacting with reality. And reality is far simpler than imagination. The mind is capable of creating thousands of fears. Reality usually presents only a few. Once movement begins, confidence slowly builds. Not because you suddenly understand everything, but because you experience progress. Progress is one of the most powerful psychological motivators. Even small movement creates momentum. and momentum changes how the brain perceives difficulty. A problem that seemed impossible while standing still often becomes manageable once motion begins. This is why people often say the hardest part is starting, because starting breaks the illusion that the problem is larger than it actually is. Once you take the first step, the brain recalibrates. It begins focusing on solutions instead of fears, and gradually the fog begins to lift. Overthinking loses its power because action replaces speculation. Consider how many opportunities in life disappear, not because people lack ability, but because they hesitate too long. They wait for confidence before acting, but confidence rarely appears before movement. Confidence is usually the result of action repeated over time. The brain learns through experience, not through endless contemplation. This is why individuals who act quickly often appear more confident, not because they feel less fear, but because they move despite uncertainty. They trust their ability to adjust along the way. They understand that mistakes are not catastrophic, they are informative. Every outcome teaches something. Even failure contains valuable data, and that data sharpens future decisions. But the overthinking mind tries to eliminate the possibility of mistakes entirely, which means it never gathers the experience needed to improve. It stays stuck at the starting point, waiting, analyzing, imagining, but never moving. And ironically, the attempt to avoid mistakes often creates the biggest mistake of all: inaction. Life rewards movement, not perfection. Every great achievement in history involved uncertainty. No inventor knew their idea would succeed. No explorer knew what they would discover. No entrepreneur knew their venture would survive. But they moved anyway. And through movement, they discovered information that thinking alone could never reveal. This is the shift that frees the mind from analysis paralysis. Instead of asking what decision guarantees success, ask what action creates learning. Learning is progress, even when the outcome is imperfect, because learning reduces uncertainty, and reduced uncertainty simplifies future decisions. Over time, this creates a powerful feedback loop. Action creates experience. Experience creates clarity. Clarity increases confidence. Confidence encourages more action. And gradually, the fear of decisions begins to fade. You begin trusting your ability to navigate uncertainty, not because the future becomes predictable, but because you realize you can adapt. Adaptation is one of the most powerful abilities humans possess. We learn, we adjust, we evolve. But adaptation only occurs when we interact with reality, not when we remain trapped inside thought. So the real question is not whether you can eliminate uncertainty. The real question is whether you are willing to move despite it. Because uncertainty is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that learning is about to begin. Every path forward contains unknowns, but unknowns are not barriers. They are opportunities to gather information. And information gained through experience is far more reliable than information imagined in the mind. The brain often fears what it does not understand, but understanding grows through exposure. The more you interact with a situation, the less intimidating it becomes. The unfamiliar becomes familiar. The uncertain becomes manageable. And gradually, the brain relaxes, because it recognizes that action does not lead to catastrophe. It leads to adaptation. This is the true power of movement. Movement dissolves exaggerated fear. It transforms vague anxiety into concrete experience. And concrete experience is something the brain can handle. This is why the most transformative moments in life often begin with a simple decision to move forward. Not with perfect planning, not with perfect certainty, just movement. One step, then another, and another, until suddenly the path becomes visible, the mind becomes calm, and what once felt overwhelming now feels manageable. because you are no longer imagining possibilities, you are living them. So if you have been telling yourself that you are indecisive, consider a different perspective. You are not indecisive. Your mind simply became trapped in analysis. It gathered more information than it could organize. It searched for certainty in a world that does not provide it. And in that search, it forgot something simple. Clarity does not always arrive before action. Often, it arrives because of action. So the next time your mind begins looping through endless possibilities, pause. Ask yourself 3 questions. What is the worst realistic outcome? Can I recover if things go wrong? What action moves this situation forward? Then move. Even if the step feels small, because small steps accumulate, they build momentum, and momentum changes everything. Soon the fog begins to clear, confidence begins to grow, and decisions that once felt impossible become natural. Not because you eliminated uncertainty, but because you stopped demanding certainty before moving. You allowed action to teach you what thinking alone never could. And once you understand this, the myth of indecision disappears. You realize you were never broken. You were simply thinking beyond the limits where thinking remains useful. Now you know the reset. Think enough to choose direction, then move. Adjust as you go, and trust that clarity will appear along the path. Because the future does not belong to those who wait for certainty. It belongs to those who move despite uncertainty. And once you begin moving, you will discover something powerful. The path forward was never as complicated as the mind imagined. It only required one step to begin. There is another hidden layer to analysis paralysis that most people never notice. It is not just about too many choices. It is about the brain trying to control the future. When the mind is faced with uncertainty, it tries to simulate every possible outcome. It asks endless questions. What if this fails? What if this does not work? What if this decision closes another door? What if something better appears later? At first, these questions feel intelligent. They feel responsible. They feel like careful planning. But eventually something subtle happens. The brain stops searching for answers and starts searching for guarantees. This is where the trap becomes dangerous, because guarantees do not exist in real life. Life is built on probability, not certainty. Even the most successful people in the world rarely know the outcome of their decisions before they act. What they know is something different. They know how to adapt, and that ability changes everything. Because once you trust your ability to adapt, you stop needing perfect certainty. You stop trying to predict every outcome. You focus instead on movement. This is the mindset shift that separates people who remain stuck from those who move forward. The stuck mind tries to eliminate uncertainty. The moving mind learns to navigate it. Think about a pilot flying through turbulence. The pilot does not try to stop the storm. The pilot adjusts the flight path. They make small corrections. They respond to changing conditions. And eventually, the plane passes through the turbulence. Life works the same way. You cannot eliminate uncertainty, but you can navigate through it. The brain becomes calmer when it understands this, because it stops trying to solve an impossible problem. Instead, it begins focusing on the next step, the next adjustment, the next piece of information. And this creates something powerful: momentum. Momentum is one of the most underestimated forces in human psychology. When you are stuck, the mind exaggerates every obstacle. Everything feels heavy. Every decision feels huge. But once movement begins, something strange happens. The brain changes perspective. Problems shrink. Possibilities grow. And what once felt impossible suddenly feels manageable. This is why the first step matters more than most people realize. The first step breaks the illusion of immobility. It proves that movement is possible. And once movement begins, the brain starts building confidence. Confidence is not something you wait for. Confidence is something you build through action. Every step you take sends a message to your brain. The message is simple. You are capable. You can move forward. You can handle uncertainty. And the brain begins updating its belief system. Instead of seeing decisions as threats, it begins seeing them as opportunities for growth. This psychological shift transforms everything. Because the fear of making mistakes starts fading. You begin understanding that mistakes are not failures. They are feedback. Every outcome provides information. Information that makes the next decision easier. Information that sharpens your intuition. Over time, this process creates what many people call wisdom. But wisdom is not magic. Wisdom is accumulated experience. It is the result of many decisions, many adjustments, many lessons learned through movement. The people who appear decisive are not necessarily smarter. They simply have more experience navigating uncertainty. They trust their ability to recover. And that trust frees them to act. But the overthinking mind rarely gains this experience because it remains trapped in the planning stage. It studies possibilities instead of interacting with reality. And because it never gathers real feedback, the fear remains strong. The unknown stays intimidating. The mind keeps imagining worst-case scenarios, but imagination is rarely accurate. Reality is usually far less dramatic than the mind predicts. This is why people often feel relief after finally taking action. The situation they feared for months turns out to be manageable, sometimes even simple, and they realize something important. The real obstacle was never the decision. The real obstacle was the fear created by endless thinking. Once action begins, that fear begins dissolving. Because action replaces imagination with experience. Experience grounds the mind in reality, and reality is easier to navigate than speculation. So if you want to break analysis paralysis, there is one principle you must remember. Action reduces anxiety. Thinking alone does not. Thinking can identify options. Thinking can provide direction. But thinking cannot replace experience. Experience only comes through movement. Every major change in life begins with this principle. A small action, a conversation, an attempt, a first step. And that step creates a ripple. The ripple expands. It generates new opportunities, new information, new perspectives. Suddenly, the situation begins evolving. Paths that were invisible before become visible. Possibilities that seemed unrealistic become achievable. But none of that appears while standing still. It appears through engagement, through participation, through movement. And this is where many people discover something surprising. They discover that the future is far more flexible than they imagined. Paths can change. Plans can evolve. New doors appear along the way. The idea that one decision determines your entire life is an illusion. Life is not a single decision. Life is a sequence of adjustments, a series of steps taken one after another. Some steps lead exactly where you hoped. Others lead somewhere unexpected. But even unexpected paths often bring valuable lessons. Lessons that shape your growth. Lessons that prepare you for opportunities you could not see before. This is why many successful people describe their journeys as unpredictable. Because progress rarely follows a straight line. It moves through exploration, experimentation, adjustment, and resilience. Once you accept this truth, the pressure around decisions begins to fade. You no longer see them as final verdicts. You see them as experiments. Experiments designed to reveal information. And when the mind adopts this perspective, something powerful happens. Fear loses its grip. Because experiments are allowed to fail. Experiments are expected to teach. Every scientist understands this principle. No discovery happens without trial and error. But failure inside an experiment is not considered defeat. It is considered progress, because each attempt brings the scientist closer to understanding the problem. Life works exactly the same way. Each attempt teaches you something. Each decision refines your perspective. Each experience strengthens your ability to navigate the future. But that process only works when you participate, not when you remain trapped in endless analysis. So the real solution to analysis paralysis is not perfect planning. It is structured execution. Think enough to choose direction, then move. Observe the results. Adjust the direction. Move again. This cycle creates progress. It creates learning. It creates confidence. And slowly, the mind begins trusting itself. Because it has proof that it can handle uncertainty. Proof that mistakes are survivable. Proof that progress is possible. And once that trust develops, something remarkable happens. Decisions become lighter. You no longer treat every choice as a life-altering event. You treat them as steps in a journey. Some steps will be better than others, but every step moves you forward. This mindset removes the weight that once caused paralysis, because the goal shifts. The goal is no longer perfection. The goal becomes progress. Progress is achievable. Progress is flexible. Progress allows adjustment. And progress builds momentum. Momentum eventually becomes one of your greatest allies. Because once momentum begins, it carries you forward. You begin noticing opportunities faster. You become more willing to explore possibilities. Your brain becomes curious instead of fearful. Curiosity replaces hesitation. And curiosity is a powerful force for growth. Curiosity encourages exploration. Exploration reveals new information. New information creates better decisions. Better decisions create stronger outcomes. And stronger outcomes reinforce confidence. This is how decisive people develop their reputation, not through perfect thinking, but through repeated engagement with reality. They learn faster because they move faster. They gain insight because they take action. And over time, this creates a powerful cycle of growth. You can build the same cycle. It begins with a simple commitment. A commitment to stop waiting for perfect certainty. A commitment to trust your ability to adapt. A commitment to move forward even when the path is not fully visible. Because the truth is simple. The path becomes visible through movement. Every step reveals the next step. Every action creates feedback, and feedback sharpens your understanding. So if you feel trapped in overthinking, remember this. Your mind is not broken. Your intelligence is not the problem. Your brain simply gathered more information than it could organize. Now the solution is to return to movement, to simplify the process, to choose direction and begin. And once you begin, something powerful will happen. You will realize that progress was always possible. It was simply waiting for you to take the first step. So take the step. Start small if necessary, but start. Because movement transforms everything. Movement creates clarity. Movement builds confidence. Movement dissolves fear. And movement opens doors that thinking alone can never reveal. The moment you act, the world begins responding. Situations shift. New information appears. Possibilities expand. And gradually, the fog lifts. The decision that once felt overwhelming becomes just another step forward. And when you look back, you will see something clearly. The obstacle was never the decision itself. The obstacle was the belief that you needed certainty before acting. But certainty rarely appears before movement. It appears after experience, after learning, after engaging with reality. This is the reset. Think enough to choose direction, then move. Let action teach you what thinking cannot, because the future does not belong to those who wait for perfect answers. The future belongs to those who are willing to explore, willing to learn, willing to move forward despite uncertainty. And once you adopt that mindset, something incredible happens. Life begins opening, not because the world suddenly changes, but because you change how you interact with it. You stop waiting, you start moving. And through movement, you begin discovering possibilities that once seemed invisible. That is the power of execution. That is the power of momentum. And that is the power of resetting your relationship with uncertainty. You are not indecisive. You are simply thinking beyond the point where thinking remains useful. Now you know the solution. Now you know the reset. So take a breath, clear the noise, choose direction, and move. Because every great journey begins exactly the same way, with a single step forward. If this message shifted your perspective even slightly, take a moment and recognize something. You just performed a mental reset, and sometimes a reset is all the mind needs to move again. If this kind of deep thinking and mental clarity resonates with you, this is exactly what we do here. Every video on this channel is designed to help you pause, reset your mind, and return to life with stronger clarity. So if you enjoyed this reset and you want more content like this, do something simple. Subscribe to the channel. This is 10 Minutes to Reset, a place where overthinking becomes clarity, where confusion becomes direction, and where a few minutes of reflection can completely shift the way you see your life. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join a community of people who are learning to move forward with intention instead of hesitation. Because sometimes all it takes to change everything is 10 minutes to reset.